Welcome back. The other big story tonight, a day after he called out the United States for sending upgraded versions of the F-16 fighter jets to Pakistan in a $400 million deal, External Affairs Minister S Jaishankar met with US Secretary of State Antony Blinken. Throughout his US visit over the last 10 days or so, Jaishankar has been taking a consistently aggressive stand, calling out terror havens, even pointing to the double standards of the American media. The question is, if America is India's best friend, perhaps best bet to take on an aggressive China, then is this a wedge in the relationship? Or can there be differences between friends in a way that it can be pointed out as Jaishankar did?
External Affairs Minister S Jaishankar holding talks with US Secretary of State Antony Blinken. The meeting comes a day after Jaishankar raised questions over the merits of US's relationship with Pakistan.
A relationship that has neither ended up serving Pakistan well nor serving America. So it is really for the United States today to reflect whether this, what are the merits of this relationship, what do they get, for someone to say, I'm doing this because it is for counter-terrorism. When you are talking of an aircraft capability of the US, everybody knows, where they are deployed and what is the use and what. You're not fooling anybody by saying.
Jaishankar's tough talk comes after the Biden administration approved a $450 million F-16 fighter jet fleet sustainment program to Pakistan, effectively reversing the decision of the previous Trump government to suspend military aid to Islamabad for providing safe havens to the Taliban and Haqqani network. At the United Nations General Assembly, Jaishankar had called out Pakistan without naming the neighbor.
Having borne the brunt of cross-border terrorism for decades, India firmly advocates a zero-tolerance approach. In our view, there is no justification for any act of terrorism regardless of motivation, and no rhetoric, however sanctimonious, can ever cover up bloodstains.
Before his meeting with Jaishankar, Antony Blinken met with his Pakistani counterpart Bilawal Bhutto Zardari and urged Islamabad on having a responsible relationship with New Delhi. By once again taking an assertive position, Jaishankar has signalled India's need to engage with the world with its own identity.
This is a sustainment program for F-16s that Pakistan has long had. These are not new planes, new systems, new weapons. It's sustaining what they have. We have a responsibility and an obligation to whomever we provide military equipment to make sure that it's maintained and sustained. That's our obligation. Pakistan's program bolsters its capability to deal with terrorist threats emanating from Pakistan or from the region. It's in no one's interest that those threats be able to go forward with impunity. And so this capability that Pakistan has had can benefit all of us in dealing with terrorism. On the question of visas, I'm extremely sensitive to this. If it's any consolation, I can tell you that this is a challenge that we're facing around the world, and it's a product largely of the COVID pandemic. Our ability to issue visas dropped dramatically during COVID, and without boring you with all of the details, this is the one self-financing part of the State Department. That is, around the world, the fees that we get for issuing visas go to our budget, and they go to our capacity to put in place the people needed to process the visas. When COVID hit, the demand for visas fell through the floor. Visa fees went away. The system as a whole suffered. And then, of course, in actually issuing visas, even with much more limited resources, we had constraints from COVID about the number of people we could have in our embassies at any one time, et cetera. We are now building back very determinedly from that. Surging resources. We have a plan when it comes to India to address the backlog of visas that's built up. I think you'll see that play out in the coming months, but it's something that we're very focused on. these connections, these people-to-people ties, whether it's students, whether it's business people, whether it's tourists, whether it's family. This is what really links us together, and the last thing we want to do is make that any more difficult. On the contrary, we want to facilitate it. So bear with us. This will play out over the next few months, but we're very focused on it. Finally, India's role when it comes to Ukraine, a potential peace process. I really want to emphasize what Prime Minister Modi said, because I think he captured, as well as anyone I've heard, fundamentally what this moment is about. As he said, this is not an era, this is not a time for war. We could not agree more. We saw the aggression, the threat of the aggression mounting from Russia against Ukraine last year. We warned the world about it, and we tried everything possible to avert it through diplomacy. Unfortunately, tragically, President Putin pursued his aggression nonetheless. And now the Ukrainian people, but also the world, are reaping the consequences. We see this not only in the suffering of the Ukrainian people, the decimation of their country by Russian forces, but we see it also in the profound threat to the United Nations Charter that binds us together, the basic principles.
All right, that was Antony Blinken, the U.S. Secretary of State, defending the sale and the upgrade of F-16s to Pakistan. G. Parthasarathy, former diplomat, joining us. Dr. Kamal Chima, strategic and political analyst, and Michael Kugelman is South Asia expert at the Wilson Center. G. Parthasarathy, how can Pakistan justify, and that too for counter-terror operations, selling a war-fighting machine like the F-16, and that too for $400+ million? It's not a small change.
Look, let us be very, very clear. Mr. Biden, or President Biden, has had a long-term affection for the Pakistan military. I was shocked when, as Vice President visiting Pakistan, instead of the Pakistan Army Chief, he went and called on the Pakistan Army Chief traveling from Islamabad to Rawalpindi. That is the natural instinct towards Pakistan of President Joe Biden. I hate to say this, but I have to be frank and candid here. I don't think that extends into the entire administration. I think it extends certainly perhaps into his vice president and some Indian legislators like Kamala Jayapal. Now, the fact is, whether they like it or not, we have our concerns about the F-16. We had an F-16 shoot down Indian Air Force, albeit obsolescent MiG-21, MiG-21M, if I understand correctly. Now, the fact is, there is a deep psychological business going into this. Mm-hmm. I'm afraid we have a president not as friendly as even President Trump, who turned down such a Pakistan request. There is no, as far as the president's mind is concerned, and perhaps his vice president, there is no bother about what India thinks or does India does. I don't extend that into the White House, and I don't extend that into the State Department.
Okay, let me ask.
There are people we should talk to. We should, after all, it is a superpower. It's a friendly country, but I cannot, in all honesty, endorse the policies of President Biden went to Pakistan Army.
Let me ask Michael Kugelman, this deal got announced just a few days after Pakistan reportedly got a $1.1 billion bailout from the IMF. Surely if a country needs to go to the IMF with quote-unquote a begging bowl, then where are they getting the money to cough up $415 million for upgrading F-16s? I mean, wouldn't that be a basic question that anyone would ask?
It's absolutely a fair point, and I think especially because of these catastrophic floods that Pakistan is dealing with now. That's, the preliminary estimates are $30 billion in damage. That's the preliminary estimate. So absolutely, I think that the timing is troubling for sure. And that's one of only a number of reasons why I personally am a bit surprised about this proposed military sale to Pakistan. I mean, as you know, U.S. security aid to Pakistan has been suspended for about 4 years since then President Trump made that move. So it is a bit of a surprise. But then again, if you go back to the pre-2018 era, the U.S. and Pakistan have had a very difficult but nonetheless continuous alliance over the years. So we have had these U.S. military sales to Pakistan in the past, and it has been a nuisance for the U.S.-India relationship, just like the relationship between China and Pakistan is a nuisance for the U.S. as well in the broader U.S.-Pakistan relationship. So it certainly is surprising, but I think that we could be returning to the normal that we had pre-2018. But final point, I don't think we should overstate the significance of this one sale. I think it's quite clear if you look at the trajectory of the U.S.-India relationship, the trajectory of the U.S.-Pakistan relationship, despite some recent momentum in U.S.-Pakistan relations, I think that clearly Washington has thrown its lot in with New Delhi in the sense that it really is committed to strengthening partnership, security partnership with India in ways that it is not comfortable doing with Pakistan.
Okay. Mr. Kamar Chima, the prevailing wisdom is two parts. Obviously, any such deal, any such huge military deal will also have domestic consequences and domestic compulsions. So the prevailing wisdom seems to be twofold. One, this is some kind of incentive or reward giving back to Pakistan for perhaps whatever help was meted out in the elimination of Ayman al-Zawahiri. And number two, domestically also this plays well. Particularly, it's in stark relief to the previous dispensation under Imran Khan, who was hell-bent on destroying Pakistan's relationship with the United States. This is perhaps incentive to the new government to put things back on track. That seems to be the most charitable explanation.
Well, I will look this situation from three ways. One is that the Pakistan believes that since 2008, India has got almost $20 billion of the military hardware from the United States. India has its own 2+2 and a strategic partnership with the United States. So the question is that it is $450 million assistance for the upgradation of the F-16 doesn't give a national security threat to India. So obviously, this is a one angle. The second one, you are talking that the Americans, obviously the Pakistan-US relations, they got, this is a transactional partnership. It has always been a transactional partnership between both the countries. It was never a strategic partnership. We remained an ally. India remained a friend of the United States. So right now, the Americans and this, what Mr. Michael Gugerman also mentioning, this continuous relationship, obviously it was, it got a bump recently, but now the Pentagon and the GHQ has always enjoyed good relation, even if there is
Mr.
some...
Chima, I'm really sorry. I'm really sorry I'm interrupting you. I have a very simple, a very basic question to ask you. Who was the last terrorist who was shot down by an F-16?
Let me tell you. You know, the existential threat to Pakistan right now comes from Afghanistan, where the TTP is hiding. The Afghan Taliban are not coming up or having a fair deal with Pakistan, where the hideouts of the TTP are there. So they're coming, cross-border terrorism is there. We are facing some serious threats from there, and the peace deal is yet to be at place. So Pakistan believes that until and unless the Afghan Taliban they do not give us the TTP, or they do not come up with a fair deal between Pakistan and the TTP, there is a strong possibility Pakistan will go for a surgical strike in Afghanistan.
You know, here's the thing. I'll give Michael one word because I think he has to go. But Michael, again, this whole, this is needed to take on the TTP in Afghanistan. This simply does not cut eyes, because just recently, and this is stated U.S. State Department position that you don't negotiate with terrorists, but just a few days ago, you must have seen that news of how there were negotiations with the Haqqani group to release a Afghan drug warlord. So on the one hand, I mean, this is what I find so baffling. On the one hand, America is selling F-16s to Pakistan to purportedly bomb TTP terrorists who are hiding out in the caves of Afghanistan. And yet at the same time, the same America is negotiating with the Haqqani network to release drug warlords.
Well, obviously double standards are a part of international relations, and that's the case for U.S. foreign policy. It's no exception. Now, the example you referred to, of course, was a case of the U.S. negotiating a swap in which, indeed, it did release that Taliban drug lord in exchange for an American who was held hostage by the Taliban. And it's not the first time the U.S. did that. The U.S. did that to get a POW, Bo Bergdahl, release in exchange for the release of several Taliban members held at Guantanamo Bay. But look, coming back to the sale, to this proposed military sale, I think maybe this is referenced before. The U.S.-Pakistan relationship is a transactional relationship. It's not a strategic relationship. So one always has to keep in mind what each side may be trying to get out of the other. And we know that it's clear that the U.S. wants to build on its capacity to be able to engage in counterterrorism activities in Afghanistan. And I think it really would like to continue to have access to Pakistani airspace. And so perhaps, don't want to speculate too much, but perhaps getting the guarantees of continued airspace, Pakistan's continued airspace for those operations, maybe this deal, this proposed sale to Pakistan is sort of a sweetener, so to speak, a quid pro quo. So I think you always have to be thinking about the quid pro quo factor in these cases, because that's how the U.S.-Pakistan relationship
Fair
works.
enough. Yes, the U.S.-Pakistan relationship is a transactional one. I'll give G. Patsadi the final word. One of the arguments from the American side, although they'll never say this publicly, is, you guys have a transactional relationship with Russia. Despite everything that's happened in the last 6 months between Russia and Ukraine, India is continuing to buy oil from Russia. India is continuing to buy military supplies from Russia. So if you can call it transactional, why can't we have a transactional relationship with Pakistan?
Look, at this point in time, there's no equation between the two. Our relationship with Russia right at the present moment is confined to the petroleum, to oil, and other such resources, gas also. So it's to meet our energy needs. It is not a military relationship. Secondly, I'm amused by my friend saying that, from Pakistan, saying that the Taliban are a danger. I think the Haqqani brothers are still in pressure and living in the Northwest Frontier Province, Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. One of them is a Taliban minister. So you've got yourself stuck in a problem where the mainstream Taliban leadership will not apply you, satisfy you, but yet, therefore, you want to take them on. Take them on, yes, ask the Americans. Let them give you attack helicopters. I'm not for you, that's for the Americans. Sure. But why F-16s? You're not going to bomb them with F-16s, or the Taliban don't have aircraft to challenge Pakistan's F-16s in the air.
Okay.
I mean, this is just, let me tell you, a basic thing I go back to, and I'm very frank about this. I think you have a leadership which has a history of being
all right.
unto-friendly. You had a very friendly president even in Trump, but we have to live with it.
Okay, all right. We'll have to live with it. I'm completely out of time. I want to thank G. Patsadi, Kamal Shima, and of course Michael Kugelman for joining us. We'll see how this plays itself out over the next few weeks and months. Mario Shakil joining you with News Epicenter in a moment.